What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Deep South Fishing. This one's definitely going to be a little bit different. This is that two-part series that I was telling everyone about, the 10 Commandments of Bass Fishing. This will be part 1, so come on with us and see what we have to say. So first of all, before we go ahead and get into it, I just want to make a mention of Ditch Pickle Baits. They have been a sponsor of mine for a little while now, and they just want you to know that they appreciate all the support that y'all are already giving them. And we do have a coupon code so that you can go over there, check them out, get a discount. The discount code is DeepSouth10, and you can go ahead and use that code at checkout towards your purchase of the baits. So y'all go ahead, check them out. They appreciate the support. They're a great local company making quality plastics, and we appreciate it if you can get behind them. So moving on to number 1 of the 10 Commandments of Bass Fishing. What do you think that could possibly be? You know, this one's kind of exciting for me because I had to sit back and think, oh man, if there's 10 things that I could bring up and talk about that could possibly make someone a better fisherman, that I can relate to, that I might have had to learn the hard way because I didn't have, someone teaching me and holding my hand the whole way. But that number 1 thing, the only way to get even to the learning curve is time on the water, y'all. That is the best advice I can give you. Is time on the water is number 1. You gotta go out there. You gotta go experience. You gotta go try things. See what works, what doesn't work. Even if you have a bad day and you don't necessarily catch a bunch of fish or any at all, you gotta look at it as a learning experience. And you gotta take what you learn as you learn it and continue to apply it until you get to a point to where you know some of these things, and then you don't have to waste any of your time trying to figure out certain things because everything's laid out in front of you. So time on the water is like one of my favorite things to talk about, and that is because I fished a lot whenever I was younger. My father was a saltwater fisherman, and I passionately love bass fishing. I've fished all over the southern central region, all over the south, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, North Louisiana, all these wonderful places, and they're all very different. And what I noticed was the common denominator was the more time I got on a body of water, the more I learned about that place. And so some of y'all might not like it whenever I tell you this, but you gotta go whenever the fishing is hard, whenever it's most difficult. Those dog days of the summer, the days after a cold front, those are the days that is really, really tough, right? So you learn most whenever the bite gets tough. You don't learn most whenever they're just out there biting on anything. So you gotta understand and try to figure out what makes those fish tick whenever you are up against the tough conditions. And I promise you, if you do that and you spend more time out on the water for them tough days, you will figure them out when most other people will not. All right. So number 2 is knowing your local seasonal patterns and forage. This one accounts for a lot, y'all. So this will indicate what sort of baits you need to be using at different times of the year. So for us, we live in South Louisiana. Predominantly just South Louisiana as a whole, from Lake Charles all the way maybe to like New Orleans. We have a lot of crawfish. So a lot of times if I'm flipping a plastic, it's a crawfish. Fish do eat shad down here, and they also eat bluegills. But you gotta know what time of the year they are eating those certain things, those forages. So like I was saying, you gotta know what time of the year that these fish are eating what. And that might seem difficult at times, but after about December, January, us down here, we start seeing a bunch of crawfish. And so I already know in my head, man, come January, there's probably a good chance all the way in through the summer, because that's crawfish season. That's when we get, most of our crawfish, that they will be eating a crawfish or two from time to time. Now, that's also not to say that where they're at, underneath that bush, there isn't a brim nest or a bluegill nest, how we like to call them down here, or a perch. So they're also eating some of those. And also one thing that I realized about the perch bite, is that those fish that are eating those bluegills are typically your bigger, more mature fish. Your smaller ones are not going to necessarily mess with a perch. So if I'm targeting 5 bites for a tournament and it's in that April, May, June, July time, I might have colors and baits that replicate a bluegill. My buzz baits are going to be black. I might even have a black spinnerbait on or a black chatterbait, and so forth. And then, that May time, is typically whenever you start seeing that shad spawn. So I'm going to start messing with white spinnerbaits, maybe a little chartreuse white, depending on the watercolor. Those fish are trying to feed up. They're trying to rebound from the spawn. So, you got to understand what's going on in your estuary to understand what those fish are eating, and you have to mimic those things in order to get the bites. As I just previously said, you kind of got to mimic what's going on in your estuary. And so number 3 is bait selection and water temperatures. We as fishermen, our job is not to get caught up on the fanciest, newest bait and get hung up on buying that new promotional item that catches our eye. It's what's going to catch the fish's eye. And what catches that fish's eye is matching the hatch. You got to understand what is in the water that they're actually eating and try to match it. And then you'll most likely be successful. So I just feel like we can't cover bait selection without at least talking, water temps just a little bit. So, and kind of back to the seasonal thing as well. During the spring, your water temps are going to fluctuate from being cool to warm, and then to warmer to hot, and hot during the summer, and then start falling off again during the fall time, and then being cold again all through the winter time. So you got to understand, fish are cold-blooded. They're not necessarily super active whenever it's super cold. They're cold, man. They don't want to run around and go look around for food. And when they do eat, typically they want it to be something larger because their metabolisms are slower, because they are cold-blooded and they don't digest as fast. So, whenever it's cold out, I want something big. I want something like a jig in my hand, or a bigger profile crawl, or something that mimics a bluegill, or something that's going to be one of the larger forages of that area whenever it's cold. And whenever it's warmer, say like through the spring and through the summertime, you can move water and you can catch fish on chatterbaits and smaller crawl baits and that sort of thing. And then back again in the fall, water temperatures coming down, metabolisms are still up, buzz baits are big, and you want to mimic like something like a perch. So, all those things you have to take into account for. And you might not want so much action and so much flash whenever it's cold out. Something dull, something big, usually gets the job done. Whereas in the late spring, throughout the summertime, something smaller, faster, flashier, catches their eyes, gets that fish to turn, makes them eat. So you got to play around with that a little bit too. But definitely, water temperature plays a huge role into your bait selection. Number 4, the weather. The weather always plays a huge role into bass fishing. It's one of the number 1 driving factors that can either be the difference of you going out and smashing them, or you having a tough day and you're struggling. So typically whenever I think of the weather, I kind of put it in 3 different categories. You have those really tough days, super cold, after a cold front, super hot, midday type stuff. Then you have just the average day, the normal day where the wind doesn't really blow too hard. It's not real bright, neither real overcast. And then you have the low pressure days, which are my absolute favorite. I love low pressure days, man. You can go and catch some hammers on them low pressure days, and it just seems like the fish always bite super good on those days. So, like I said, those post-front days are typically very difficult to deal with. The bite's often very slow. The fish don't want to eat because they had fed up day, or 2 prior leading up to the front. Typically they bite best the day before the front. you're fishing off the backside of that. So you're dealing with fish that's already fed. Typically, water temperatures might be on the decline. Not necessarily the funnest time to fish, but certainly a time where you can learn a lot about the fish. You may only get 4, 5, 6 bites throughout the day, or sometimes when it's really, really tough, none at all. But, one thing I want to stress to y'all the most is, and typically how I deal with a post-frontal day, is I size down. I size down a whole lot. So my bait gets smaller. Oftentimes my line gets smaller. You won't see me throwing buzz baits in top waters day after a front. You'll see me dragging a small crawl or a wacky worm or something of that sort. Just trying to do anything I can to get a bite. Another thing too about the wacky worm, a lot of those fish become suspended. And suspended fish, will hang out in the middle of that water column. And that wacky worm will float, until they meet up with the fish. And suspended fish are very difficult to catch. And if these fish go suspended on you, that just means you have to throw a light bait, and let the weight of the bait fall in front of them. They're not going around chasing and looking to feed at that time. So oftentimes the slower you can approach them and the longer you can keep that lure in front of their face often can lead to multiple bites throughout the day. So the average day. The average day is what you're going to see probably 160, 200 days out the year. It's a normal day. It's not ultra bright out. It's not post-front. You might have some clouds. Water temperatures are hanging about normal. Not super windy. Moderate winds, 5, 10, maybe even 15 miles an hour. I would consider, pretty normal. These days, man, you kind of got to figure it out on the fly to see, is it a topwater deal in the morning and then they get off the topwaters, maybe get on the spinnerbait and chatterbaits and that sort of thing? Is it that they want a flipping deal? Now you got to start thinking about the forages for that time of year, try to maximize your potential of putting that bait in the areas that the forage lives in order to catch those fish that live in those areas. So you really and truly, you're just trying to trick the fish, and you're trying to increase your odds by knowing what's going on and what's going down in that area. So my favorite, the low pressure day, these are absolutely fun, y'all. The fish bite more on low pressure days than any other days, and these are days where it's super cloudy out, very breezy, maybe even possibly a light rain. It's that last 12 to maybe 24 hours before that front moves through often. Or, during the summertime, we have a lot of afternoon showers, and right before those showers, it will kick up the bite a good bit. These are the days that you really want to be out there. I've even been known to take a day off of work to go fish these, because they absolutely munch on these low pressure days. And you can catch fish all sorts of different ways, almost any type of way. But a low pressure day, typically before a front and before like a thunderstorm in the afternoon, during summertime, those fish notoriously eat topwaters that time. And I have almost all my success on topwaters on those types of days. And they have made fun memories and had led into a lot of big fish being caught. So if ever you have the opportunity and you see, man, there's a front moving through on Sunday, well, guess what that means, guys? You need to be on the water Saturday, because you're going to catch more fish on Saturday than Sunday by far. And it will be a world of fun for you. All right, so here we are, number 5. And number 5 is color selection. So color selection is probably one that we can all discuss and sit around and talk about for hours on end. And this might be a tricky subject, but I'm just going to go ahead and give you what I know and what I've learned and what I believe and what I trust to work. So First thing I think of color selection, I'm thinking my normal colors, black and blues, whites, green pumpkin, California 420, green pumpkin red, all these great colors that we have. And I can't help but think, man, there's so many people out there that's just afraid to fish a little dirty water. And it makes me believe that maybe it's because they're just not throwing the right colors. There's nothing wrong with fishing dirty water, people. There's big fish that live in dirty water, and I catch them all the time. And as a matter of fact, whenever I see dirty water next to the clean water, you'll find me in the dirty water sometimes when the clean water is just right around the corner. And that's because I have all the faith in my color selection. And what I mean by that is I'm not going to fish chocolate milk. But when I find well oxygenated dirty water, I'm okay with fishing it 100% of the time. And I know other people aren't. And that's one of the reasons why I think I catch fish that other people aren't. So don't be afraid to fish some muddy water. Tie you on a black and blue, a June bug. Them fish see it. And let me tell you something about that dirty water. Those fish hold tighter to structure, which as a fisherman, that is an advantage. That gives you the advantage because they're holding tighter to the structure. So that means your strike zone got smaller. So all you had to do is throw it up on the structure. And if they're there and they want to eat, they will. So now I'm off my rant in my juice box about the dirty water. I just want to go ahead and address, our plastics first. Black and blue June bug, like I just previously said, is great for dirty water. It works in some stained water too. Watermelon red, great choice. California 420, one of my favorites. And then you have, your supernatural watermelon colors, browns, brown with some red in them, those crawl colors. And those do really well, whenever you get around that super clear, that gin black, almost tonic colored water. And so that's about where I stay at it with it, guys. I stay pretty simple on my colors. 70% of the time, I'm throwing black and blue June bug or California 420. It's not very often I really deviate off of that, so save yourself a bunch of money. Buy some black and blue, buy some June bug, a natural crawl color, and one of my all-time favorites, I really don't like saying it, especially on the channel, but y'all probably seen it some, is like a purple and black. It just flat out catches them. Purple and black gets it. And I'm about one of the only ones that I know that throws it, except for me and some of my other buddies, and they might not be so happy that I've brought this out here to y'all. But yeah, y'all try some black and purple, man. That is killer down here. So now we got moving baits, and there's a bunch of different styles of moving baits, and I'm gonna just address, the main ones like your spinner baits, buzz baits, and crankbaits. Let's go ahead and put our spinner baits and crankbaits in the same basket, and then we'll address top waters after that. How about that? That sounds good. So spinner baits and crankbaits. Whenever I think of a spinnerbait, I'm thinking of shad profile. That's what I'm trying to mimic. I'm trying to mimic a shad 90% of the time. And you can go ahead and try that, black, blue, black, purple, whatever with, the brim deal. But most of the time, for my spinnerbaits, crankbaits, and even chatterbaits too, that's relatively similar. They're in the same ballpark here. I'm throwing white and yellow, sexy shad, that sort of color, because that's what I'm trying to achieve and accomplish with those. I will throw a black and blue chatterbait throughout the year at some point, through like that springtime, and after that, I kind of go to shad, and then in the fall, I kind of swap over to my brim colors again. But that's pretty much where I stay at with that. So look, if you're just new to the game and you're just trying to save money or not like try to buy everything all at once, my best advice to you is just buy white or buy white and chartreuse and black and blue. Those colors work day in and day out. They're tried and true. Pretty much, I never really noticed a difference off a black and blue versus a bluegill pattern or a green pumpkin pattern and a white from a white and chartreuse. Normally, if they'll hit one, they'll hit the other. These fish down here aren't all that particular. You just got to figure out the right deal normally, and have something relatively in the ballpark. So yeah, that's my advice for that. Keep it simple on the colors. Don't get too crazy. Don't get radical. There's no need for it. You'll just end up buying a bunch of tackle that just stays in the boat or stays in your tackle box and it never gets used. And then you have a bunch of wasted money that you never end up catching a fish on that piece of tackle, and it's just waste. It's wasteful. All right, so top waters. Now we're gonna talk about frogs and buzzbaits. We're just gonna keep it at those two. Just keep things a little simple. I don't want to go all over the board with this and try to get too far into detail, but I'm starting with buzzbaits. So with buzzbaits, it's either going to be a white without a clacker, or a white with a clacker, or a black and blue without a clacker, or say like a black and blue with a clacker. And I do like a purple buzzbait. Y'all have already seen that, but that's kind of an extension to that brim pattern. So if y'all want to see more of that, go back into, I think it's the Bayou Black blow up video. I explained that fairly into detail there. But if I'm more or less worried about if it's a black or white deal, and if it's a clacker or non-clacker deal. And obviously with the clacker, you're going to be making a lot more noise. And typically I do better with the clacker during the summertime, whenever the water temps are up, they're hot, the fish are super active, and they have they're hyper metabolized, and they're just looking to smash anything that comes around them, and that sucker calls them from a long ways away, and they'll come and track it. Now, during the spring and the late fall, you can catch a lot of fish on a buzzbait. However, you gotta understand that clacker deal might not always be the deal. Typically, it is in the spring whenever we see a peak in the water temperatures, which gets the fish hyperactive because of their metabolisms, and they're also protecting nest. And it's just a combination of all sorts of different things that's happening at that time, and that's why they want to eat that buzzbait more so than anything else. So, yeah, guys, like it's top waters are pretty simple for me too, and also. Moving water. Typically, you have shad falling out of drain. Just think about that for a second. That white would be my probably go-to for it. And it's probably going to be without the clacker. Just because it's a little bit more subtle. A shad doesn't make a whole lot of movement, but a brim does. So think about that. Just understand, a lot of times, whenever I catch them on a clacker, it's a dark-colored clacker, because it's making more noise. They have more water displacement, and so does a brim over a shad. And I just wanted to bring that out and enlighten that for y'all, so that maybe y'all see that there's a little bit of reason and philosophy behind the two differences. So we all know I love to throw a frog, especially y'all guys that have subscribed to the channel. And y'all have seen a lot of the fish that I've caught on a frog as of lately. And, the question gets asked a bunch. Man, them fish must be really hungry if they're eating frogs. Why are they eating so many frogs? Well, it's not necessarily because they think it's a frog. Most of the time you catch a bass on a frog, it's because they think it's a shad or they think it's a bluegill. 90% of the time. So I say that because if you're one of those guys that throw that natural frog colored pattern, try a straight black, or try a black and blue, and also try a jet straight white, and see how much more fish you catch on it. It's gonna baffle you if the only color frog you ever thrown was a toad pattern. And I tell you that because I've experienced that, and I've tried to display that in some of the content in the past. I throw a black frog around the spawn time because, the last thing that a bass fish wants to see on their bed is a brim, because they eat their eggs. And that frog looks a whole lot like a brim sitting there above the surface, just sitting there dying. And what does that bass fish do? They want it out. So they want to come and eat that thing and take it away so that its eggs can be safe. You know, so they eat brim throughout the year, as we already talked about, and they also eat shad throughout the year. You have to be more so worried and concerned about the size of your frog and trying to match that to what it is that they're eating. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about with the frog fishing deal is whether or not it needs to be a keel or a walking design or a popping frog. And man, you know, I let the conditions tell me, and I keep them honest on both. And so if I'm around a lot of grass and lily pads, I typically like the keel design because it walks on top of the pads better, and I get a little bit more action in between the pads, and it floats a little bit better on top of the grass. And not all the time do you need a whole big old chug to get them fish excited. Most of the time it's just a little subtleness, a little difference that gets them to come up and look at it, and it excels in the duckweed. Now with the popping frog, I will say, light rain, heavy wind, those sorts of deals, you're much better off with a popping frog, especially around the timber. And if you need a frog to stay in place a little bit longer because you're throwing it back in the juice, you know, back in those little pockets this big, and you want something that'll just pop and stay there for a while and get that fish's attention and draw them out of that log jam, then you're much better off with a popping frog. So it kind of all depends on what you're fishing and the conditions of that day and what, you know, the forage is, whether it's a shad deal or whether it is a brim deal. Alright guys, so I'm fixing to go ahead and wrap it up. Drop us a comment. Let us know if there's anything that we kind of skimmed over and went through a little too fast. If there's something that you might want us to cover a little bit more in detail, we're more than happy to go back over that. I didn't want to make this series too far into detail. I just felt like I might lose some folks. You know, I'm a serious tournament fisher, but I understand that not everybody is. And I love the details, whereas other people might want to just kind of keep it somewhat general. So let us know if there's anything that we missed. And go ahead, check out Finn's Fishing, check out Ditch Pickle Baits, and don't forget about that coupon code. So we'll see you next time. Peace.